Hey everyone, today we're ranking every map in Dead by Daylight. Our criteria today is going to be twofold. The main ranking is going to focus on the balance of every map, how fair they are, but I'll also be giving my thoughts on the map visuals too in a little separate tier list as we go. Let's get into it. Terrible maps. Badham Preschool is by far the worst map in the game. This map has the dreadfully strong main structure that makes it intensely survivor-sided to the point of being genuinely quite unfun at times as killer. The map also has lots of other problems, like there being multi-level structures scattered around with the smaller houses, that makes it just a bit awkward to control. Visually, the map's decent. It's a pretty faithful recreation from the film, but it's not that visually exciting. A few cool references and elements with Freddy's claw scratches appearing here and there. Overall, pretty good. A Garden of Joy has had a few reworks, but it's still wildly unfair and very survivor favoring. The main structure isn't as much of a problem as it used to be, but it's still very bad. The worst part of the map is the straight line of loops from the car park all the way down to Shack, which is just completely busted. I also find, as a side note, the collision on this map is still really awkward. The raised areas of road are just extremely inconsistent, hitbox wise. Visually, really good though. I love the vibe of this map with its more urban look to it and just the amount of amazing spooky visuals there are throughout. You really get a feel for this community and how it turned dark and is now abandoned, so just amazing. Disturbed Ward since its release has always been a problem. It's a map that's still way too big, I think, with its strong central structure and branches coming out from the center. The main building is insanely strong for Survivor, and sort of a chore to get out of the way as Killer. Cut off like one side of the map and it'd probably be okay. It's just all the branching parts coming out of the center that make it quite miserable. Visually, the main structure is really well done. You do get a feel for this creepy asylum. It's also quite characterful with the burnt out roof and the tiles which are charred and slightly alight still. Grim Pantry is honestly just such a weird map. It feels so inconsistent and doesn't really favor either side, it just fucks you both over. The map has quite a strong main structure to loop as Survivor, but then it's also got a bunch of horrible dead zones as Killer. It's pretty abysmal in that sense. I find this map simply quite frustrating for whichever side I'm on, as it just feels unfair a lot of the time. You lose because the map is weird. Visually, I quite like it. It's pretty spooky and it really reflects this village of people consumers well. The bottom of the pantry is also very eerie and has a nice atmosphere. It's not going to be placed that highly though, because Swamp is one of the few realms that is yet to get a visual update. Forgotten Ruins has been labelled as quite problematic since its release, and largely down to it almost being divided into two separate maps, with the portals and a single staircase connecting them. I think this map would work better if there were just more ways to get from floor to floor aside the portals. It creates a really unpleasant division currently, and messes up game flow quite a bit. This map can be very strong for Killer if you just pick one of the sides. It can be pretty Killer-sided. If you try and play both floors, it sort of becomes the opposite. Visually, the map is 50-50. The upper part of the map is quite dull, with the tower being the only cool part. Then the downstairs is like the coolest thing you'll ever see, so pretty good, but it's drawn down by the upper floors, I think. The Shattered Square is also a map I cannot bring myself to enjoy just due to how large but also flat it is. The map feels weird to play on, and its lack of discernible structures and square layout makes it quite frustrating to play on, I find. As Survivor, I feel disoriented, and see this with teammates too, and then as Killer I just find it a bit hard to control, I guess. Visually the map is not that nice either. I do like how it reflects Knight's conquests, but the flatness of the map really gets to me in this case. It looks too flat, and the main structure isn't overly compelling, I'd say. Nicer map tint now though, at least. It had that horrible orange before. Eyrie of Crows has been improved, but it still suffers the same issues it did before these improvements. The main structure is still way too big and quite sprawling, and the map is still too big as a whole, I think, as well. Many killers also struggle on this map too due to its brightness. Visually, the map is amazing with its towering structure and murder of crows hanging out in the upper area. The lighter brick loops are also quite pleasant to look at too. Bad maps. Azarov's resting place is probably one of my least favourite maps in the game, personally, maybe my least favourite, and I think it's really terribly laid out with its elongated space and the line of loops that allow a survivor to easily get from one side to the other safely, with each end then having a strong structure, either with shack or the crane or bus loops. I hate this map as killer, maybe more than any other. The one upside for killers is the few dead zone areas you get on the office side, but that's about it, I'd say. Visually, I'm not a fan either. The office is really boring, and whilst it does speak to Azarov's dinginess, it doesn't give you much. It's also just not very interesting to look at or explore. The Crush car wall loops are great though, along with the Scrap Bus and Crusher. Azarov is also not visibly present, despite it being his resting place, which is odd, I think. That's like a key part of the lore. Groaning Storehouse has always been quite a survivor favouring map, with it having a very strong central structure to loop and a number of branching areas, not too dissimilar to Disturbed Ward. There's a few stretches of some open areas for killers to make ground, which is nice, but it's not much. Visually, I'm not sure if this map does the best at fitting in with the Macmillan theme, with the storehouse not looking to contain anything you'd need for the estate. It'd be cool to see pickaxes or iron bars or coal stored here, for example. I don't know, mining related stuff. The exterior works well though. Shelter Woods is still not great, I think, balance-wise, although greatly improved from how it was before, just being a complete dead zone. Nowadays I think it's still very killer-sided, with much of the map remaining a dead zone, and having certain flaws for particular killers, like Dredge having no lockers in some corners. The main structure becomes far too much of a focal point too, I find. It still sorta works though, sort of due to the dense wood and ability to stealth your way as Survivor, you can sorta make it work. Visually unique pairing together the old and new of the game, the original Macmillan Woods with the high tech of Skull Merchant. It does work, I think, and I like how it's incorporated with lots of small horrific details within and the testing dummies outside. Pretty cool. The Pale Rose is the other swamp map, and it's just another weird one. It's really outdated and sort of a product of its time. The main structure is pretty fair, to be honest. It's just the everything else around it that's very hit or miss. Swamp in general struggles with its outer areas and having just lots of bulk it doesn't need. Bad but not terrible though in this case. It's still decently balanced in its core areas, with the decently spaced loops of varying strength. Visually, I quite like this map despite its lack of visual upgrade. It looks very spooky and does have a haunting atmosphere. The vibe hits with the mud, reeds and boats which are now stuck. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is a map that isn't particularly balanced, admittedly. This map actually suffers partly due to its visuals balance-wise. The fact that the main structure of the map is that cool actually does detract from gameplay slightly, as the main structure is very strong yet is not that dense with gens. It's also readily accessible from almost anywhere, meaning you're guaranteed to chase through it as killer. Quite survivor favouring, I would say. Visually awesome. I love all of the details of this map and the look of the pizzeria. I think it fits the Withered Isle realm incredibly well, and its creepy vibe. Nostromo Wreckage is similar to Pantry in that it sort of just isn't good for either side. It has quite a strong main structure of the Nostromo and surrounding area for survivors, but then there's the outside wreckage area which is really killer favouring. You might think this makes it fair, but I think it just makes it very annoying for either side. It's just quite frustrating whichever side you're on, and really big as well. Visually, the map is really lovely, and I adore this darker blue tone in the skybox. It looks so good. The map is also littered with cool Easter eggs, and the Nostromo itself is very visually impressive. Top tier visually. Decent maps. Fractured Cowshed has been greatly improved since it shrunk, but it is still a bit odd as a map. It still feels quite large, and its loops are all very linear in how they connect. Its main structure is sort of fine. It doesn't really favour anyone, with it having good escape points for Survivor, but also not much centrally favouring Killer. I sort of feel like you could get rid of one of the corners or sides of the map and it would feel much better to traverse and play on. Not bad though. Visually it's one of the least horror feeling maps in the game, but I do like the atmosphere still, and I think the inclusions of Billy's room are greatly needed to balance out the lack of much else in terms of horror flair. Torment Creek is a very spaced out map that feels a bit too spaced out at times. It sort of works though, as if all the tiles were close, it'd be incredibly survivor-sided. I think it is still a survivor-leaning map, but due to the weird dead zones in between and on some edges, like by the cornfield, it kind of evens out. This is such a dice roll map though for both sides I think, and it rarely gets consistent results for either side I find. Still, I'd say it's decent as maps go. Visually, cool. I like the shattered silo, and it feels like a well-represented part of the farm that was left to disrepair, falling apart and leaving this forgotten farm. Effective vibe. Mother's Dwelling is famous for its huge sides. It's a big map, and that results in it just being generally not great for either side, too large for many killers to traverse effectively, and quite punishing for survivors if they're spread far. The main structure is fine. Most of the loops are pretty fair too. It's just this map's overwhelming size that lowers it, I think. Visually, a lovely map. I love the atmosphere of this rainy cabin, and you really get a feel for the setting and tone of where Huntress spent most of her days. The Underground Complex is a map that has come and gone and come again from the game. I say this map, whilst weird, is kind of fine. It's another map that doesn't really favour either side due to its oddities. It's indoors, it has narrow hallways, basically no sightlines, and it's still confusing after it being out for 6 years. I'd say it's just decent. Visually, I think this map nails the Stranger Things vibe. The Porter Room is visually accurate and impressive, and the wider map reflects the creepy aura of the Hawkins lab pretty well. My main downside would just be the lack of much visually within each of the rooms. It's all very samey. It'd be nice for some more detail, I think. The game gets a bad rap, and it's somewhat deserved. It's a weird one, the game, as it's a map that doesn't really have windows. It does have some, but they're largely replaced in favour of pallets. This creates a really bizarre dynamic, and often one that killers don't like. I personally find it quite fun, even as killer, as it's just a unique experience. And whilst sure there's a lot of pallets, I actually find it's not that bad a lot of the time, so long as you play the tiles well. Windows can often be stronger for survivors, at least skilled ones, and so this works out fine as a trade-off sometimes. This map is also indoors, but its upper floor feels sort of like an outdoor map a lot of the time, due to its high ceilings. The dingier and darker lower floor is where things get more claustrophobic. Visually, this map is unique. It's quite plain, and whilst it does have some cool references, I'm not sure it makes up all too much for the dull visuals. I'll go decent. Blood Lodge has been greatly improved since it altered its layout to be more square, with this making it far more fair, I think, and actually decently balanced nowadays. Whilst I do have issues in general with Autohaven maps, I think this one does a pretty good job at being fair, with the main structure hardly being imposing, yet providing enough of an advantage for survivors and hindrance for killers from the wider map. Yeah, not bad. Visually quite dull. As I've mentioned, I'm not a fan of the Autohaven realm. This map has a very basic house structure where Azarov lived. I wish we got a bit more visually to indicate his wrongdoings and personality even. It feels a bit plain. Mount Ormond Resort nowadays is decent. It's had some changes over the years, and in its current state, it's not too bad. It's a lot more square now, and whilst the main structure is still very busted for survivors, it's sort of a one and done thing. Once the resources are gone, it's actually quite bad, with there being a lack of good windows. The wider map is pretty fair aside this too, with a decent scattering of loops along with open areas. Visually, I like the snow of Ormond, but I do wish it looked a bit more similar to Ormond like mine. The main structure does feel a bit too washed in its colours. I sort of wish there was more evidence of Legion's crimes here and the things they'd stolen, like the road signs. Pretty nice atmosphere though, and definitely chilling. Gas Heaven has been greatly improved since its rework and nowadays flows decently. The main structure is quite interesting, and the loops are great as survivor and manageable as killer with the breakable wall and lifting garage door. The loops on this map are mostly okay, and some of the better spaced Autohaven ones I find. Not amazing, but not half bad either. Visually, I think it's the best offering of the Autohaven realm, with the gas station feeling core to the visuals of it and featuring a dilapidated neon sign. It feels like a shady place and fits in well with my expectations for how it would look based on the lore. Raccoon City Police Station West Wing is the bad side of RPD, I would say. This side has the indoor area into the STARS office. It just doesn't flow as well, and this side of the map is considerably stronger for survivors and just way more out of the way and difficult to hold, I think. It's not terrible still. RPD is much improved nowadays. Visually, it's RPD. It's great, incredibly thoughtfully made map and very well put together. Good maps. Wretched Shop is another very big map with a main structure that's largely unobtrusive and quite fair. Overall, I think the tiles flow pretty well though, and there's a better balance on this map I find over most other Autohaven maps with its tile spread, and having some bad mixed with good along with some open and a handful of dead zones, so yeah, not too bad. Visually pretty dull, as I've mentioned for Autohaven, although I do appreciate a auto-themed section of this realm, and having a mechanic workshop and car being the focus, it works. Lampkin Lane has historically been one of the most problematic maps that the game has seen, and nowadays it's improved quite a bit. My biggest criticism nowadays, I would say, is the weirdly wide central street. This is such an odd and largely dead zone in the middle and around it. If you squish the map together and cut out a few loops, it would be okay, I think. I quite like the central structure for both sides, and otherwise the map's okay, I think. Pretty good. Visually, quite nice. It does reflect Haddonfield from the original film pretty well and has cool nods toward Halloween with the pumpkin outside the Myers house. Everything does feel a bit weirdly oversized though, almost like a doll's house, I would say. Ironworks of Misery is a map I find a little tough to judge with it having a really bizarre main structure. It's a hassle to chase through it as killer, but also decently out of your way as survivor, with it requiring you to meander through the entire thing and across the top without stopping. The loops surrounding it are half decent and not too bad, with there being a bit of a gap between the loops and structure start. Yeah, pretty good. Visually, I do really like this map too. The main structure just looks really impressive, and it's a really key feature of the Macmillan estate as well. This map really gives you a feel for the size of the estate, how big this place really was. So yeah, I like this a lot. Family Residence is an overall good map, I'd say, with it having a fairly simple rectangular structure with the main building at one end and the shack at the other. The flow of this map can be a bit odd at times, with action generally happening on either end, but it mostly works out. Visually, I like this map a lot and find the visuals very pleasing. It has a nice colour and the buildings look very cool, with a lot of detail inside. I also like all of the various greenery around that differs from most other maps. Rotten Fields is quite an empty map, and it relies a lot on the corn to balance this out, as it is largely a killer favouring map, I think, with its lack of loops. It does get evened out though due to the central shack, and there being a decent number of good loops available around the edges, like Cowtree. Visually, yeah, it's a cornfield, and gives us an idea of what the Coldwind Farm fields may have looked like. It doesn't do much for me personally, and the lack of main structure does feel wanting for this map, I find. Fallen Refuge is the Walking Dead map, and one that works pretty well despite its simple structure. It has two key cornerstones, the main structure and the shack, and the core central area is pretty fair as an area to traverse with a mix of loops as well. Pretty solid. Visually it's very simple, and I do wish there would be more Walking Dead themed parts to it, but I do like the filter over the map, and there's a very zombie or apocalypse feel to this map, which is cool. The Thompson House, I've come to the conclusion, is actually decently balanced, despite it often being branded as not being. I think it actually manages to keep a solid balance, and largely due to its massive corn so close to the centre. It acts as a risky crossing point for survivors, but also a stealthy approach for killers. You have to venture in there for best efficiency, but it's a bit risky. The surrounding loops can be a bit hit or miss, with the main structure having both strong and weak areas for each side. I really like the visuals of the Thompson House, and I think it's the best Coldwind Realm map, with it showing off the core family house and what Billy did to it after taking over the farm. I also just love the sprawling corn out front. Rancid Abattoir is a map I find pretty fair as maps go. Its central structure is pretty solid for both sides, it has one of the lowest corn densities out of any of the Coldwind Realms too, which does mean it's a lot more open, which allows its slightly weird layout to work quite well. It's another map where survivors can do very well, but once you've cleared a few loops of their resources, it drops to the killer's favour pretty quickly. Visually, a really spooky realm and one of Coldwind's most daunting, with the hollow cries of cattle in the abattoir, and just dingy environment. Very well done. Great maps. Dead Sands, I'd actually say, is pretty good despite me feeling an instant bias to drop it to the bottom of the list due to my experiences with Eyrie. This map is pretty solid though, with its central shack in lieu of a main structure and surrounding loops, in which none of are particularly bad or super strong either. The one downside this realm has in general is how bright it is, which can sort of mess over a handful of killers. For survivors, I'd say it's pretty fair, nothing particularly stand out, but not too bad either. Visually, this map is pretty dull. It's quite bright and the rocks are kinda cool. I do like the variance in verticality, with this map having some dips as well as rises, but that's about it. It's okay. Midwich Elementary School is much more balanced nowadays, I'd say, with its new ways to reach the second floor. They've opened up the bathroom tunnel permanently, and it's further balanced by there being clutter in the halls to allow for more stealth for both sides. Midwich is another case where it's sort of weird and unique, but I think this plays into the favour of the map, allowing it to actually be quite fair due to its oddness. Visually, Midwich is one of the most impressive things I think they've ever done in the game. This map is so wildly incredible in its details, and the sheer amount of love poured into its design. Suffocation Pit has always been a map I quite like, despite having a bit of an odd layout with it almost being split in two by its central dividing line. I think it's quite fair too, because either side has the potential to mess it up and restrict themselves to one side or another. The bottleneck center works really well though, being an area where most of the action tends to take place. Visually, it's one of my favourite Macmillan maps, as I think it nails the vibe, and even shows off the mine where the cave-in happened. I just love the visuals of the mine too, and the way the track runs through. Father Campbell's Chapel is a map often considered very balanced and has always had a good reputation. I think it pretty solidly lives up to this still. It has some issues I think, with map edges being a bit dead, and there being some really brutal main structure spawns for killer, but generally speaking, really solid, good loop spacing, and not too bad for either side. Visually a nice map too, with it having a detailed main structure, but also elaborate circus layout, and Maurice of course. It feels well placed within the Crotus Pren Asylum theme too, which is always nice. Coal Tower was often dubbed as the fairest map for a long time, but I think those days are gone. It is still pretty balanced and up here for sure, but it does have some definite stronger areas for Survivor and some for killers too. I think this map manages to clear it however due to its smaller size. Pretty fair main structure and overall good map flow. I'd say this map is visually quite good too. The main structure is simple yet quite appropriate. It's not particularly exciting or anything, and I find the structure itself a bit confusing as to what it is, but it feels fitting for the vibe, I guess, so decent. Toba Landing is actually quite a fair map as maps go, with it not being overly big, its main structure lacking any notable strong loops, and the general map feeling pretty balanced for each side. There's a few areas that favour Survivor or Killer, but generally really solid. I do think this map's visual noise does work to its favour balance-wise too. Talking visually, it is quite an abrasive map in terms of its visuals, but wow does it look good. So many details, so much care put into thinking about this alien world. I really love it. Greenville Square I do think is quite fair, especially if you sort of disregard the main structure. The main structure itself is pretty fine too. It's not strong really for either side, with good creative options for each. The statue is a nice secondary structure to act as a separate marker point as well. The wider map is a little big, but I think the loops are what make this realm solid with its variety of tiles and interesting setups like the double pallet loops. It's quite dynamic in that way. Visually great too. I love the Withered Isle atmosphere, and Greenville fits it perfectly, with the cinema acting as this great presence, blending perfectly and featuring a plethora of details and cool visuals. Amazing maps. Dead Dog Saloon is still a really great map. This map has strengths for both sides I think. While small, its main structure favours survivors greatly, but the wider area is quite controllable as killer and favours them more so. I always just feel pretty happy on this map on either side. It's also the only map with a shack with a breakable wall, which balances it right out too. Really solid. Visually this map has a great vibe, with it showing off the aftermath of a gang altercation in a small dusty town. It captures that very well. The atmosphere as a whole in fact, with the tumbleweeds and cawing of the vultures, is just great. Treatment Theatre, or Larry's as it's often just called, is likely a little shocking to see so high, but this map I think is pretty fair. The claustrophobic nature of the map and the sprawling hallways I don't think favour anyone necessarily. There's a few killers admittedly who struggle quite badly on this map though, and it's certainly survivor leaning, but I think it still deserves to be up here. None of the loops are horrible I think, and they're spread decently. Visually this map has a great vibe too, with it being a disturbing insight into Doctor's twisted mind and experiments. It's a little cluttered and confusing visually too though, but this is just a factor of it being in the entities realm I think, partly. And that central room with all the TVs is just so amazing. Really well done. Especially for it coming so early into the game's life cycle as well. Really impressive. RPD East is a shocker to see so high probably, with the first map tier list I made and first iteration of RPD being the worst map in the game by a long shot. Nowadays though, actually really balanced. This side at least. The outdoor area is a good extension to the core area and flows far better than the west. Visually again, it's incredibly impressive, well adapted with tons of secrets, cool visuals and love put in. Sanctum of Wrath is a nice little simple map. It's got the core temple structure at its center, which is one of the fairer structures in the game I'd say, acting more as a focal or vantage point, and not favouring either side particularly, I'd say. This map does feel a little big at times, but it's very easy to get around, which evens this out I think. The worst areas of this map I think are some of the far corners, which can become a bit exhausting to reach for both sides. Visually, nice. It reflects the Yamaoka vibe well, the central temple and statue withered down is effective, and yeah, good. Of course the statues surrounding the temple are just iconic as well. And the Tanuki, very cool. Wrecker's Yard is a good map. It's another one of those with the central structure being the shack, with loops and structures surrounding it. It's a very small map, but it's pretty fair overall. There's a few things that can lean one way or the other, but generally speaking, just really solid map. Visually, not my favourite, but as I've mentioned, I just don't like the colouring of this realm. I find it really ugly. There's no main structure either, so I'd probably just call it boring. The Temple of Purgation is a map that looks quite big due to its very imposing main structure. Yet it is not that big, at least comparatively to Mother's Dwelling. The flow of this map is quite solid, and the main structure not being particularly strong for survivors, yet offering plenty of things to utilise, for example the lower levels being so tight, and having plenty of environmental objects to play around with. There's a few general Red Forest loops that I find a little unfair for killer, but on the whole, really solid. Visually, I adore this map too. It pairs up the lovely rainy atmosphere of the Red Forest with a Babylonian temple, which has this great majesty and aura to it. Inside it has the cool tablets and writing and, beautiful. Ormond Lake Mine is a recent map where I think they really nailed the balance. I would say it's a little killer favouring due to its brightness, which enables much easier tracking. I mean, the snow really highlights anything red. Aside this though, the main structure is well placed and quite fair, the loops are spaced nicely apart, and nothing sticks out as particularly favouring one side or the other. Survivors get some really strong loops, killers get some advantages. It seems pretty balanced, I'd say. Really great map. Visually, I love this map too. I really love that they revisited a snowy realm for one, but also made it look better. The smoother, brighter snow of the map is so much more pleasant than the dingier Ormond mixed in with like dirt and stuff. I also love the small horrific details sprinkled around, like the death elevator. The central structure is also just really unique and quite cool, so top tier for visuals too. Alright, well that's gonna do it. I'm sure there was a number of hot takes in there. Maps are always a little bit controversial, but I hope you enjoyed regardless. Let me know your thoughts as always down below. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.